working as a financial analyst at Baxter Industries, I believed I had found a place where I could grow professionally and make a difference. The company had a reputable reputation and I was excited about the opportunities that would arise. However, everything changed when my supervisor, Thomas Green, started making unwanted advances. I clearly remember the day it all started. I was in my office, reviewing financial reports, when Green came in and closed the door behind her. "Ethan, I need to discuss something important with you," he said, with a smile that made me feel uncomfortable. "Of course, Thomas. What do you need?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure. He approached me and, instead of talking about work, started making inappropriate comments about my appearance and insinuating that we could work closer together. I was shocked and immediately made it clear I wasn't interested. "Thomas, I'm here to work, not for this kind of conversation. Please respect that," he said, trying to be firm. Green laughed, as if my reaction was a joke. "Relax, Ethan. I'm just trying to be friendly. Think about it," he said, before leaving my office. From that moment on, advances continued. He called me into private meetings, made suggestive comments, and on several occasions tried to touch me inappropriately. I knew I needed to do something, but I also knew that reporting my supervisor could have serious consequences for my career. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. After a particularly difficult week, where Green tried to kiss me during a meeting, I went to Human Resources to report the harassment. "I need to speak to someone about Thomas Green's behavior," he told the receptionist. She referred me to one of the HR managers, Karen. I told her everything that had happened, hoping something would be done. "We'll look into it, Ethan." "Thanks for bringing this to our attention," Karen said, writing everything down. However, instead of finding support, I was surprised a few days later with a notification that I was being fired due to performance issues. "This is absurd," I exclaimed, upon receiving the news. I knew it was direct retaliation for reporting Green. That night, I sat in my apartment, feeling betrayed and helpless. It was then that I decided I couldn't let this go unpunished. I picked up my phone and called Jessica Kane, a longtime friend and private investigator. "Jessica, I need your help," he said, his voice shaking. "Of course, Ethan." "What happened?" she asked, worried. I told him all about Green's advances and my unfair dismissal. "This is unacceptable. We will expose these corrupt practices," Jessica said with determination. "But we're going to need concrete evidence." We decided that I would infiltrate the company as a freelancer to collect this evidence. Jessica would use her investigative skills to help me gather all the necessary evidence. "We're going to take down Green and change the culture of this company," she said confidently. I knew it would be a dangerous and risky journey, but I was determined to seek justice. Green could not be allowed to continue harassing other employees with impunity. "Let's do this, Jessica." "I won't rest until the truth comes out," I replied, feeling a new spark of determination within me. With Jessica by my side, I was ready to face any challenge. It was time to fight for truth and justice, not just for myself, but for all who were victims of Baxter Industries' corrupt practices. The idea of infiltrating Baxter Industries seemed audacious but necessary. Jessica Kane, my private investigator friend, was instrumental in this process. "Ethan, if we're going to do this, we need to be meticulous and careful. Green can't even suspect what we're up to," she warned me, with a serious expression. We gained access to the necessary documents and, under the guise of a freelancer, I returned to the company. It was strange and at the same time comforting to be back, even under such different circumstances. Every step I took through the halls of Baxter Industries was a mix of nostalgia and determination. I knew I was there for a greater reason. My initial plan was simple: collect as much evidence as possible about the financial fraud and moral and sexual harassment perpetrated by Thomas Green. I used all available resources, from conversations with former colleagues to detailed analysis of documents. "Jessica, I found something interesting. It appears that Green has been manipulating the financial reports for years," I said on a late-night call. "That's great, Ethan. But we need hard evidence, something that can be irrefutable, she replied, ever pragmatic. During my time at the company, I realized that I was not the only one suffering at Green's hands. At lunch with an old colleague, Lucas, I heard disturbing stories. He harassed me, Ethan. And when I refused, my career started to fall apart. I had to take a demotion to keep my job, Lucas confessed, visibly shaken. These stories strengthened my resolve even more. Each report was another piece in the puzzle that Jessica and I were putting together. But the situation started to take a dangerous turn when I started receiving anonymous threats. Ethan, stop now while you still can. You don't know who you're dealing with, read a text message I received one morning. Jessica, I think Green is aware of what we're doing. I received a threat today, I said, worried. That means we're on the right track. But we need to be even more cautious, she replied, without hesitation. Every day, the tension increased. I knew I was dealing with someone powerful and unscrupulous, but I couldn't go back. The most shocking discovery came when I gained access to some confidential emails. Green was not only involved in financial fraud, but he also had a network of complicity within the company, which made everything even more complex. One night during one of our secret meetings, I shared this discovery with Jessica. He's not alone. There are more people involved, perhaps even at higher levels of the company, I said, trying to remain calm. It complicates things, but it also gives us more material to work with. We need more proof, Ethan. This could be bigger than we imagined, she replied, with a determined gleam in her eyes. The mission was far from easy. Every day was a battle against time and an invisible but powerful enemy. I knew I was risking my safety, but the idea of justice and exposing the truth was stronger. The threats continued, but so did the discoveries. And with each piece of evidence collected, I felt like we were one step closer to unmasking Thomas Green and changing the toxic culture at Baxter Industries. Jessica and I were prepared to face whatever came, knowing that the truth was on our side. The infiltration was just the beginning of a long journey towards justice, and we were determined to see it through to the end. As we delved deeper into corrupt practices and harassment at Baxter Industries, there was a moment that completely changed the dynamic of our mission. Jessica and I were in a low-key cafe downtown, our laptops open and a pile of documents spread out on the table. Jessica seemed restless, something that was unusual for someone as meticulous and focused as she was. I realized there was something else on his mind. Jessica, is everything okay? I asked, trying to break the ice. She sighed deeply, closed the laptop and looked straight into my eyes. Ethan, I need to tell you something that could change everything. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. Jessica was never one to hesitate to speak, so she knew what came next was serious. I also used to work at Baxter Industries, she began, her voice taking on a darker tone. And just like you, I was forced to leave for trying to report what was happening inside. I was shocked. Why haven't you told me this before? I asked in disbelief. Because I didn't want to influence your decision to go through with this. I wanted you to do this for your own justice, not for my revenge, she replied, her voice firm but with a hint of vulnerability. Jessica then began to tell her story. She had been hired by Baxter Industries as a compliance analyst, a position that required extreme integrity and attention to detail. During her time there, she discovered several irregularities in financial and human resources practices. When she tried to report these practices, she became the target of bullying and was eventually fired under false allegations of inappropriate conduct. I remember one meeting in particular, Jessica continued, her voice now thick with emotion. Thomas Green was there, along with other executives. I presented the irregularities I found and suggested an independent audit. They laughed at me, Ethan. Said I was too young to understand how things really worked. The next week, I was fired. This is unbelievable, I muttered, feeling the anger rise inside me. And you just accepted that? No, Ethan, she replied, her eyes shining with determination. That's what motivated me to become a private investigator. I decided that if I couldn't get justice within the system, I would get it from the outside. I realized that our mission now had an even greater weight. It wasn't just about my fight for justice, but hers as well. This brought us even closer together, transforming our partnership into a true alliance. So what do we do now? I asked, feeling a new wave of determination. We will continue collecting evidence, but we need to be more cautious. Green will stop at nothing to silence us, she replied. But now, with my experience and internal knowledge of the company, we can anticipate his moves. From that moment on, our investigation took on a new dimension. We were no longer just two people trying to expose an injustice, we were two victims of the same corrupt system, united by a mission of revenge and justice. Jessica showed me old documents she had saved as a precaution. There were emails, doctored financial reports, and even recordings of meetings where Green and other executives discussed how to cover up their fraud. I never imagined I'd have to use this, Jessica said, holding up one of the documents. But here we are. That's more than enough to start taking Green down, I said, feeling a mix of hope and anger. Let's do this, Jessica. Let's take down this corrupt system once and for all. She smiled, a smile full of determination and, for the first time in a long time, hope. Yes, we will, Ethan. Together, we will make it. This revelation not only strengthened our partnership, but also gave us a new perspective on what we were facing. We knew the fight would be difficult, but we were ready. And, most importantly, we were in this battle together. When I began infiltrating Baxter Industries, I had no idea that I would find such precious allies in the midst of chaos. Maria Torres, an experienced and respected accountant at the company, was the first to approach me. I was in the cafeteria, analyzing some reports when she discreetly sat down next to me. Ethan, right? She asked, her voice low and cautious. Yes, I replied, trying to hide my nervousness. How can I help? Actually, I think I can help you, she continued. I heard about what happened to you and I went through something similar. Maria told me that she had also been harassed by Thomas Green and that, like me, she faced veiled threats to remain silent. We decided to meet outside the office, in a quiet cafe, to discuss the details. I have some documents that might be useful to you, said Maria, as she leafed through a brown folder. Here is evidence of financial fraud and accounting manipulations that Green has been doing for years. He thinks he's untouchable, but with this, we can take him down. I thanked Maria immensely and, over the next few weeks, more people began to speak out. First it was Lucas, an administrative assistant who had been bullied by Green into altering data in financial reports. Then, Alice, a human resources analyst who had witnessed several harassment situations, but never had the courage to speak out. One day, while talking to Jessica about the progress of our investigation, my phone rang. It was a message from an unknown number. I know what you are doing. Stop now or you will face the consequences. I showed the message to Jessica. That's a good sign, she said, with a mischievous smile. It means we're on the right track and Green is getting scared. Jessica and I decided to organize a secret meeting with all employees willing to collaborate. It was risky, but necessary. We found a safe place outside of town to meet. I know everyone here is taking a big risk, I began, looking at each of the determined faces in front of me. But together, we have a real chance to change things. We cannot let Green continue her abusive and corrupt practices. We need to act as a team. Lucas raised his hand. I was able to access some of Green's old emails. They clearly show that he was aware of and involved in the fraud. Alice also had news. I've spoken to some victims of harassment and many are willing to testify anonymously. I think we have a good chance of exposing all of this. The energy in the room was palpable. Everyone was determined to see justice done. Maria stood up and, with her firm stance, declared, "Let's do this. No more fear. No more silence." Over the next few weeks, our small internal resistance grew. More and more people joined us, bringing new evidence and testimonies. Jessica coordinated everything with surgical precision, while I remained undercover, gathering information and keeping morale high. In one of our meetings, Maria brought something new that changed the entire game. I discovered a document that links Green to a larger network of corruption within Baxter Industries. This could be the key to taking down not just him, but the entire corrupt structure of the company. This revelation gave us new hope. We now had a powerful weapon against Green and his accomplices. The courage and determination of each of my unexpected allies were living proof that, together, we could face any adversity. With the accumulated evidence and the collective strength of everyone who joined the cause, we were ready for the next step, public exposure in the search for justice. And most of all, I knew I was no longer alone in this fight. The intense investigation began to deeply affect my personal life. Every time I buried my head in yet another pile of documents or spent sleepless nights analyzing data, I felt like I was losing a piece of myself. The impact was especially evident in my relationship with Claire, my girlfriend. "Don't you think you're going too far, Ethan?" Claire asked one night, as I sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered everywhere. She was standing in the doorway, with her arms crossed, a worried expression on her face. "I can't stop now, Claire. I have to do this. Not just for myself, but for everyone who suffered at Green's hands," I replied, without looking up from the documents. She sighed deeply. "I understand what you're trying to do, but what about our lives? What about us? You're putting yourself in danger. What if something goes wrong? What if Green finds out about all this and comes after you?" I stopped and looked at her. The fear and worry in his eyes were undeniable. "Claire, I know this is hard. But if I don't do this, no one else will. He's going to keep hurting people, destroying lives. I need to do the right thing." She shook her head, frustrated. "What about us? What about our plans? We've been together for 3 years, Ethan. We've talked about getting married, having kids. All of that is at risk now." The pain in her voice hit me hard. I stood up and walked over, taking his hands. "I don't want to lose you, Claire. But I need you to understand how important this is. I can't live with myself knowing I let this go." She pulled her hands away and walked away, tears starting to stream down her face. "I don't know if I can do this, Ethan. I don't know if I can live with this uncertainty, this constant feeling that something terrible might happen." That night, Claire slept on the couch. I lay awake, my mind racing between the investigation and the growing fear that I might be losing the woman I love. The emotional conflict was overwhelming. Each new piece of evidence we found felt like a step forward in the search for justice, but also a step back in my relationship with Claire. The next morning, Jessica showed up at my apartment to discuss next steps. She noticed the tension in the air immediately. "What happened?" he asked, frowning. "Claire and I are having problems," I admitted, feeling a lump in my throat. "She's worried about me, about us. And I don't know how to balance it all." Jessica sighed and placed her hand on my shoulder. "Ethan, you are doing something extremely brave and important. But you also need to remember that the people you love are an essential part of your life. Don't let this destroy them." I knew she was right, but there didn't seem to be an easy solution. Every day that passed, I felt Claire slipping further away. She started spending more time outside, coming home late from work, and when she was home, the silence between us was almost unbearable. One night, while I was reviewing some files, Claire walked into the room and stood in front of me. "Ethan, I need some time. I need to think about all of this. I'm going to stay at my sister's for a while." I felt as if a hole had opened beneath my feet. "Claire, please don't go. We can work this out together." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Ethan. But I need space to think. I hope you understand." And just like that, she was gone. I stood alone in the silent apartment, feeling the weight of my mission mix with the crushing pain of loss. The investigation was consuming everything around me, and I didn't know how much longer I could hold out before everything completely came crashing down. But I couldn't give up. For Claire's sake, for the sake of everyone who suffered, I needed to keep going. And hopefully, one day she would understand why I did what I did. When I realized that Green was about to take drastic measures to protect herself, I knew the battle was far from easy. He had hired a team of influential lawyers and was clearly willing to do anything to discredit my investigation. It was as if we were playing a game of chess, and Green was determined to put me in checkmate. "Jessica, we need to be even more careful now," I said, looking at my investigator friend as we sat in our office filled with documents and files. "Green is falsifying evidence and trying to make me look like the villain in the story." Jessica nodded, her expression serious. "I know, Ethan. I've dealt with people like him before. We need something that's irrefutable. Something that even his lawyers can't dispute." It was then that we decided to intensify our search for evidence. We spent sleepless nights reviewing documents, listening to recordings and trying to find any flaws in Green's defense. Every detail, every little inconsistency, was a potential clue. I felt the weight of responsibility, but I also knew I couldn't give up. One night, while we were exhausted and surrounded by piles of papers, Jessica held up a sheet of paper with a twinkle in her eye. "Ethan, look at this. It's an old email from Green to one of the executives. It mentions manipulating financial reports." I took the paper and started reading. My heart accelerated. "This is big, Jessica. Really big. We need to verify the authenticity of this, but if it's true, it could be the key to taking down Green." However, we knew that just one test would not be enough. Green had a network of influences and resources that could easily divert attention. We needed something more concrete, something that could resist any attempt at falsification or manipulation. It was then that Maria Torres, the accountant who had teamed up with us, came to us with a tense expression. "I found something," she said, handing us a flash drive. "These are recordings of meetings where Green openly discusses financial fraud." Jessica opened her laptop and we started listening to the recordings. Green's words were clear and incriminating. He talked about how he manipulated numbers and used his power to intimidate those who opposed him. It was the proof we needed. "That's perfect," Jessica said, smiling for the first time in days. "With these recordings and the emails, we have a solid case." However, Green was not inactive. He quickly counterattacked, claiming I was trying to extort the company. His lawyers presented falsified documents, trying to paint me as the villain. The tension increased every day, and I felt pressure from all sides. "We can't let him beat us, Ethan," Jessica said, staring at me with determination. "We need to present our evidence to the court before it can strike us down." Finally, the day of judgment arrived. Green was confident, surrounded by his lawyers. I was nervous, but also determined. When the judge asked us to present our evidence, Jessica and I stood up and began to lay out everything we had found. We presented the emails, the meeting recordings, the testimonies of other employees who had been harassed and intimidated by Green. With each new test, I could see Green's confidence crumbling. His lawyers tried to object, but the evidence was irrefutable. When we finished, the room was silent. The judge looked at Green and her lawyers with a stern expression. "The evidence presented is overwhelming. Mr. Green, you are being accused of financial fraud, harassment, and tampering with evidence. This court will not tolerate such actions." Green tried to protest, but it was futile. The truth had been exposed, and he had no way to hide anymore. The court ruled in our favor, and Green was formally charged. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a huge weight lifted from my shoulders. Jessica hugged me, and I knew our fight had been worth it. We had exposed Green and begun to change the toxic culture at Baxter Industries. Justice had finally been served. Over the months, our investigation began to take on a scale that I never imagined. At first, Jessica and I were focused on gathering damning evidence against Thomas Green, but as the documents and testimony accumulated, the true extent of the corruption and harassment at Baxter Industries became impossible to ignore. We decided it was time to take our fight to the public. "Jessica, I think we need to involve the media. The evidence we've gathered is solid, but if it's confined to the courts, it could be manipulated by Green and his lawyers. We need public pressure, I suggested firmly. Jessica agreed, with a determined nod. You're right, Ethan. Let's look for investigative journalists who can help us break this story. That's how we got in touch with Mark Thompson, a renowned reporter who had already exposed other cases of corporate corruption. We set up a meeting and, when we met, we gave him a complete dossier with all the documents, recordings and statements we had collected. This is explosive, Mark said, leafing through the dossier. If all of this is true, Baxter Industries is in serious trouble. It's true, Mark. And we can't let them go unpunished. We need your help to bring this to light, I replied, feeling a mixture of anxiety and hope. Mark promised to investigate further and, within days, the first story was aired. The impact was immediate. Local media began to cover the news, and soon other national outlets were also covering the case. With attention focused on Baxter Industries, the pressure on Green and the company's board of directors increased significantly. Media coverage brought to light a wave of solidarity and indignation. Former employees of Baxter and other companies began speaking out, sharing their own stories of harassment and corruption. Social media exploded with the hashtag #JusticeCaparethan, and several workers' rights organizations and NGOs mobilized in our support. One rainy afternoon, I was at home, reading an article about our case, when I received a call from Maria Torres, the accountant who had helped us with crucial documents. Ethan, did you see the latest news? They're talking about how Baxter has always hushed up harassment. This is taking on a huge scale, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Maria. We are finally making a difference. But we still have a long way to go, I replied, trying to remain calm despite the whirlwind of emotions. Demonstrations of support were not limited to the media. In front of the headquarters of Baxter Industries, groups of protesters began to gather daily, demanding justice and changes in corporate culture. Some carried signs with phrases like "No more harassment" and "Transparency now," while others organized vigils in solidarity with the victims. It was at one of these demonstrations that I met Clara, a former employee who had been fired under similar circumstances to mine. She approached me with teary eyes. Ethan, I was fired 2 years ago for trying to report harassment. I thought I would never see this day come. Thank you for not giving up. Your gratitude touched me deeply. Clara, thank you for having the courage to speak out. Together, we are stronger. Public pressure began to take effect within Baxter Industries itself. Some board members, fearing for their own reputation and the company's viability, began to distance themselves from Green and consider measures to reform the internal culture. The crisis of confidence spread, and soon the company was under intense scrutiny. However, we knew we couldn't let our guard down. Green still had power and influence, and our every move was meticulously planned so as not to give him the chance to retaliate. The battle was far from won, but the tide was beginning to turn in our favor. The exposure of Green's corrupt practices and the company's toxic culture not only brought the truth to light, but also inspired change for many who, like me, were struggling in silence. Our fight was becoming a public cause, and with the support of the community, we felt that justice was within our reach. Finally, we were there, at the boiling point of our entire investigation. Jessica and I had spent sleepless nights combing through documents, cross-referencing information, and interviewing employees. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. However, we knew this was the most dangerous moment of all. Green would certainly not give up the points easily. Do we have everything we need? I asked, my voice thick with tension. Jessica looked at me with determined eyes. Yes, Ethan. We have enough evidence to take Green down. But we need to be careful. He could try anything to save himself. With the help of Maria Torres and other allies within Baxter Industries, we were able to gather irrefutable evidence of financial fraud and a culture of systematic harassment. Green had manipulated balance sheets, embezzled funds, and intimidated employees for years. Now, we had in our hands emails, accounting documents, and even recordings that directly incriminated him. On the day scheduled for the confrontation, we entered Baxter Industries with a mix of nervousness and determination. Jessica had arranged a meeting with the company's management, claiming that we had important information that needed to be discussed. It was now or never. As soon as we entered the conference room, we felt the tension in the air. The board members watched us with inquisitive eyes. Green was there too, sitting with a confident smile that made me feel sick. "Let's get to the point, Mr. Carter," said the company president, trying to maintain formality. "What do you have to show us?" Jessica placed the first document on the table. "Here is proof that Thomas Green has been diverting company funds to personal offshore accounts. We have emails that show his direct instructions to manipulate financial reports." Green laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. "This is absurd. Do you really think you can bring me down with these baseless accusations?" "These accusations are not unfounded, Green," I replied, feeling adrenaline course through my veins. "We have documents, recordings and witnesses that confirm everything. And we will not stop until justice is served." The room was silent for a few seconds, until one of the directors, visibly shaken, spoke. "This is very serious. We need to investigate these allegations immediately." It was then that Green, in a last desperate act, abruptly stood up. "You can't do this to me. I'm the soul of this company. Without me, everything will fall apart." "No, Green," Jessica said, with a calmness I envied. "The company will prosper without you. It's your corruption that's destroying everything." Suddenly, Green made a sudden movement, trying to grab the documents. There was a commotion, but we managed to hold it off. Security was called, and within minutes, he was being escorted out of the building, still shouting threats and accusations. But it didn't end there. Green tried one last trick, using her contacts to defame Ethan and Jessica in the media, claiming that it was all an extortion attempt. However, the truth was already exposed, and public support was on our side. In the days that followed, Baxter Industries began a full internal audit. Green was officially charged and arrested, and other corrupt executives were fired. The company began a restructuring process, with a new focus on ethics and transparency. I received an offer to return to the company under new management, but decided to follow a different path. With Jessica's help, I opened my own ethics consulting firm, determined to help other companies avoid the same mistakes. Claire, who had distanced herself during the riot, came closer again when she saw my fight for justice. Together, we begin a new life, free from the shadows of the past. The final confrontation was over, but our journey was just beginning. Green's counterattack. Faced with imminent downfall, Thomas Green had nothing left to lose. He knew his career was hanging in the balance, and that prison was a very real possibility. Desperate, he decided to use every weapon he had at his disposal to destroy me. I, Ethan Carter, was about to face the fiercest counterattack of this entire battle. It all started with an anonymous message I received on my cell phone. "You think you can take me down, Ethan? You don't know who you're dealing with." Jessica, my friend and private investigator, was next to me when I read the message. She frowned and said, "He's starting to get desperate. That's a good sign, but it also means he's going to play dirty." And she wasn't wrong. The next day, a defamatory article about me was published in one of the city's main newspapers. The headline read, "Former Baxter Industries employee accused of racketeering and fraud." The article was full of lies and painted me as a criminal who was trying to extract money from the company. "That's absurd," I exclaimed, throwing the newspaper on the table. "He's fabricating evidence against me, Jessica. I need to do something." Jessica placed her hand on my shoulder and said calmly, "We're going to work this out, Ethan. We need to think strategically. He's trying to destabilize you. We can't let that happen." In addition to the media slander, Green began leaking my personal information. Secrets that I never wanted to be public were now available to anyone who wanted to read. My family started receiving threats. My girlfriend, Claire, was scared and increasingly worried about our safety. "Ethan, this is going too far," Claire said, tears in her eyes. We can't keep living like this. You need to give up this fight." I hugged her and tried to comfort her. "I know it's hard, Claire, but I can't let Green get away with this. He needs to pay for the crimes he committed. I promise I'll fix this." With the help of Jessica and our allies within Baxter Industries, we were able to gather more evidence against Green. Maria Torres, the accountant who had been harassed by Green, managed to access crucial documents that proved the financial fraud. Other employees also began providing valuable information. "We need a game-changing strategy," Jessica said, as we analyzed the evidence we had. "Green is trying to destroy you publicly. We need to show he's lying." It was then that we had an idea. We decided to present the evidence against Green at a press conference. It was risky, but it was the only way to ensure the truth came out. We invited journalists from various media and prepared a detailed dossier with all the evidence we had. On the day of the press conference, I was nervous, but determined. "Let's do it," he said to Jessica, who nodded with an encouraging smile. When we got on stage, I started saying, "Today, we are here to expose the truth about Thomas Green and the corrupt practices within Baxter Industries. We present all the evidence, from financial documents to employee testimonies." The media was shocked by what they were hearing. However, we knew that Green would not give up so easily. While we were at the press conference, we received an urgent message from one of our allies within the company. "Green is trying to flee the country," the message said. Wasting no time, Jessica called the authorities and provided all the information needed to stop Green from escaping. In the end, Green was arrested while trying to board an international flight. Authorities found additional evidence linking Green to a larger network of corruption within Baxter Industries. The senior executives involved were also arrested and prosecuted. The battle was long and difficult, but we finally got justice. Green was convicted and the company's toxic culture began to change. I was awarded substantial compensation, but decided I did not want to return to Baxter Industries. Instead, I started my own ethics consulting firm, committed to promoting integrity in the corporate world. Claire, seeing the courage and integrity with which I faced this whole situation, reconciled with me. Together, we begin a new life, free from the shadows of the past. And so, justice prevailed. The final twist. The feeling that we were close to a major breakthrough was palpable. Jessica and I were immersed in papers, digital files, old emails, and anything else that might give us the final clue. The nights turned into dawns without us noticing. I knew we were close, but I also felt the weight of responsibility and danger that involved. "Jess, I think I found something," I exclaimed, barely containing my excitement. Jessica quickly approached, her eyes shining with curiosity and determination. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, leaning over to look at the document I was holding. "This is an internal memo, signed by one of the executive directors. It mentions a special account run by Green for extraordinary expenses. The amount is astronomical and does not match any of the official transactions." Jessica quickly read the document and smiled. "That's great, Ethan. But we need more. We need something that directly connects Green to the other executives and proves that everyone was involved." I knew she was right. This was just one piece of the puzzle. But the feeling that we were finally peeking into the truth gave us new impetus. We continued to dig through files, emails, and financial records until we finally found what we were looking for. "Look at this, Jess," I said, holding up an email between Green and one of the senior executives. "They are discussing manipulating financial statements to hide losses and divert funds to personal accounts." Jessica looked at me with an expression of triumph. "Ethan, this is the proof we needed. This ties Green directly to the network of corruption within Baxter Industries." We felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as we gathered all this evidence. We knew we were about to take down not just Green, but an entire network of corrupt practices at the company. But we also knew that this meant exposing ourselves to even greater risks. The next day, we scheduled a meeting with Baxter Industries management. I was nervous but determined. Jessica and I entered the conference room, where the directors were already waiting. Green was present, with an expression of arrogance that would soon turn to despair. "Gentlemen, we have irrefutable evidence that Thomas Green and other executives are involved in a scheme of corruption and financial fraud," I began, handing out the documents we had collected. "This evidence shows balance sheet manipulation, embezzlement of funds and moral and sexual harassment." The silence in the room was deafening as the directors examined the documents. Green tried to protest, but was quickly silenced by one of the directors. "This is unacceptable," exclaimed one of the directors, turning to Green. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Green, pale and sweating, mumbled a few words but knew he was trapped. The board decided to immediately suspend him from his duties and launch a full internal investigation. In the following days, local media exploded with the news. Public pressure increased, and other officials began to speak out, corroborating our findings. Baxter Industries was forced to fire corrupt executives and implement a complete overhaul of its corporate culture. I was rewarded with substantial compensation and an offer to return to the company under new management. However, I decided to refuse. "Jess, I think it's time to move on. I want to start my own ethics consulting firm. Help other companies avoid what happened here." Jessica smiled. "I think it's an excellent idea, Ethan. You have my full support." My relationship with Claire also transformed. She saw the courage and integrity with which I fought for justice, and together we decided to start a new life. Free from the shadows of the past, we were ready to build a better future. And so, while Green was arrested and the corrupt executives faced justice, Jessica, Claire, and I began a new chapter in our lives, knowing that our fight brought real and necessary change.